Well, I just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. And also, this is just a beginning of a series of just talks with indigenous souls, indigenous peoples around the world, and just wanting to know how you feel about what is going down right now for everybody in the West, which has been going down for indigenous people forever, since I can ever remember. There's a long, long history of indigenous peoples being locked down and being exploited and maligned. And I suppose that has definitely been my life path, to be involved with indigenous souls. And I'm really honored that you would take this time just to give us a perspective from your point of view, from your multiple cultural point of view, as to what indigenous voices, as far as you're concerned, could say to us here in the West. How would you, what's your perception of it? What's going on?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
It is, it is.
First of all, I'm one of those, I believe that at any given moment, the universe is in a state of perfection.
Yeah.
And within the human realm, we are here to learn. And for some reason in the Western world, we have had linear thinking. And as we transition back into circular thinking, we realize that everything comes in cycles.
Right.
And so everything that's considered the injustices, and they have been extreme, but that just shows us how stubborn humans are. Some lessons are hard to learn.
Yes.
And I believe that what's happening now is that cyclical effect of us coming around one more time and seeing, like, did we get it this time, or are we didn't get it, and so we're going to go another cycle before we learn. I'm a former high school teacher,
right.
And I continue to teach. And adults, oh my goodness, children are fabulous. Adults already have their own preconceptions, and they have this idea that they know. Right. and they know, and they're totally can do everything by themselves.
Yeah.
As an individual.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of shifts in paradigm that started a while back, not just now. These ages of cycle, the length in terms of those cycles are very long. And so, we could see this coming. People called it the age of Aquarius.
Right.
People looked at, they're waiting for the apocalypse there. But basically, it's knowing that we were entering a transition. And although if we had to draw a line that says, this is this part and this is, we have crossed the line. Sure. But we're going to be in transition for the next 500 years, just like we were coming up to this point,
Right.
So, but I definitely know that, because I can feel it, I know that the frequency is not the same frequency and the vibration has increased.
Sure.
We are functioning at a different level.
Yes.
And the earth itself is taking care of herself. This COVID time has just, the repercussions are so numerous.
Yes.
We cannot even begin to talk about them all and the many different levels that it occurs on.
Right. I agree.
And I think that indigenous people, what happens with us is that we remember.
Right.
And, it may have been pushed to the back of our memory, but we remember and we know how to connect. Right. And in the Western world, they seem to maybe have forgotten how to reconnect.
Yes. I mean, I love the fact, and I wanted to ask you, I jump in at this point, and what you're saying, circularity and the cycles. This for me all speaks about the mother, the earth, feminine, and feminine societies, which are we share things together. whereas this male exploit the land, exploit each other, and all that stuff, the capitalism we have in the West, doesn't seem to go anywhere except to war. And war has been part of our planet. But I wanted to ask you about your roots, my love, because I was fascinated in our conversations prior. And I think everybody would love to know about your roots and how you've come to this path, because I've come to this path through my Russian roots and through the feminine and my practices as a pagan and studying as an anthropologist. So it's I'm fascinated by this, and it's such an honor to have you here. So please, I'm going to shut up now and just let you talk just a little bit more.
Wow. In Hawaii, there's just, and I believe all over the world, there's just this mix of peoples. We're not just one thing. I am Native Hawaiian through my mother, but as well as she brings me the aspect of me that's Chinese.
Okay.
So I have that. And on my father's side, we have Filipino and Spanish blood. So I was born and raised in Hawaii in a household that spoke English, and the parents were, although none of them were white or American, they were seeking after the American dream. They both served a military service.
Right.
I was brought up in this small town where I have returned to live because this is the healing spot on our island. And then I had the opportunity to travel. So I got on the USS World Campus, USS Universe World Campus afloat with Chapman College. They had a cruise ship that was a campus, a university campus.
Okay.
And my father was the traveler, and he sent me off to the Orient. So I was 17 years old, and all the crew members were worried, what is this child doing here by herself? But I got a good base in Chinese. I traveled throughout the Orient, Philippines, Korea, Japan, Thailand. And then I spent 3 weeks totally on my own in Hong Kong. And, that was such a different kind of education, but that was my true education.
Right.
And then I got itchy feet. I had studied Spanish in high school because we weren't allowed to learn our own language yet.
Wow.
So Hawaiian, although I speak it fluently, was acquired after the fact, after I returned from Europe. So I went to study abroad in Salamanca in Spain. Did a lot of traveling around Europe, and then I got a degree here and there in Spanish.
Sure.
And I went back to live there. So I lived there about 15 years. And I spent time in the Canary Islands as well as in Morocco. Morocco always called my attention, and Spain in itself has such a diverse layering of histories and civilizations. You got the Vikings and the Visigoths, and then you got you got the Druids who came down and in Galicia in the northwestern part. They wear skirts, and they play a gaita, which is a bagpipe, and they have vegas, which were like the quote, the witches, And we just had Halloween, and my grandson asked me, what are you going to be? And I said, Tutu is always a witch. I have always been a witch. But, and while living in Spain, I was there during the rule of Franco.
Sure.
And so that gave me a kind of social awareness that I had never known living in Hawaii.
Were you there for the change, for the revolution?
Well, I was there when he died.
Right.
And then through that transition, when Suarez came in, and then the return of the monarchy, and and then the Soy got into power, which was the socialist. But just watching what was happening in Europe, for me, that was a kind of political conscious, social consciousness that I did not know being brought up in Hawaii. In Hawaii, we just kind of go with the flow, and at the flow, you just know as a child, there's all these people. But for me, I always wanted to learn our language. I couldn't understand why I had to learn about the Boston Tea Party, and why our history and our arts were not accessible and available to us.
Sure.
So, you know, I went to Spain. I took a couple flamenco classes, learned how to play a little bit of
Yeah.
guitar. But I kind of, while I was in Spain, I had studied with the Rosicrucians. And so that was
Interesting.
opening up that esoteric, and I would go to these sites and go to these places, and you know, I was really called to that. My friends, we kind of got into the Rosicrucians from a friend of ours, Reni A, who was French by birth.
Right.
And then that opened up another place for me. And then, although I was living in Spain, I studied spiritual astrology with White Eagle from England
Okay.
for a number of years. And that was kind of like my boost into that world.
Right.
But while I was living in Spain, I realized that I had these gifts. And so you know, I began to, I just have them develop. And I look back then and what I know and can do now, and it's like, wow, I really didn't know any.
Yeah. And was this during the time of Franco, or was it after?
Let's see, probably around, you know, Franco died, I think, in 75 or 76, one of those years.
Right.
And it was right around that time, because in spite of Franco and the
Yeah.
hold that he had, you know, with the civil guard,
Sure.
there were always the curanderas,
Yes.
who were the healers,
Right.
and there were the people that read cards.
Right.
And I don't know if I told you about this woman, Teresa. I had found out that she read cards, so I went to go hunt for her. And Salamanca is a tiny little town. And
Right.
can you believe I never found her the first time I was there?
Okay.
So when I returned to Spain,
It's small. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, a friend of mine told me, you know what, let's go, hurry, I'm going to take you someplace, you're just going to love it. And
Right.
he took me straight to this woman. And when I walked in the door, she said, where have you been? She goes, I have been waiting for you for so long. And I just thought, oh my goodness.
Right.
So yeah, and she proceeded to tell me that you know, that I had these gifts and they were from my grandmother, and
Right.
told me so many things that I wanted to know how she knew all those things.
Amazing. Amazing.
That kind of started my push. But you know,
Right.
when I was younger, there was a television show called The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
And they would end it with a quote from the Bible, from Joel, about how your children or old men dreams, and your young people will see visions or something. And I always kept that to heart, because I always knew there was something more out there. But you know, I didn't know. I'm just a normal kid. So
Yeah, isn't it strange? You know, what you're saying is really interesting, because there's so many people now having these spiritual awakenings, these epiphanies in this time, and it's like the whole, it's like the whole human race, or so many people are waking up because nothing else serves them. There's no way out, you know, and it's an extraordinary thing. Maybe it's a way in.
Well, I believe that it is, because I believe that although maybe the majority, the masses, have not yet reached a point, throughout all history, there have been those who have continued to work in the light, who have continued, and you know, and we have a little different take on it in Hawaii as far as light and dark, but who have continued to work along those lines to set up this foundation. And then there's the start people, because you know, even though I was born here and everything, I'm not really from here. I just came here to do my job.
Sure.
And part of that is the preparation and the awakening.
Yes.
You know, and I believe that that's also where the gifts come from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The insanity to think that we're the only life form in the universe is extraordinary. I mean, and that expansion is going on everywhere. And I wanted to take you further into that if I could, because it was so enchanting when we spoke last time. And I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop with you. And I just thought,
I left our Zoom meeting with this high, and I called my friend. I said, you know, my yesterday was kind of a junk day, but oh my goodness, I had this conversation with this guy on Zoom. And it's like finding your people.
Right.
You know, when you have so much commonality at these levels, at these vibrations, you know, you can have known someone your whole life.
That's exactly
and not get to this point and have 10 minutes with a person that you're on that wavelength, and
yes.
it's like you've known them eternally. Yeah,
That's
I'm going to do a talk pretty soon about timelessness and
please,
eternalness.
please, because I was talking to some of my friends, in Palestine, and I was talking about our conversation, and they were so excited, and obviously I wanted to record this and send it to them and send it to other people who would like to just be inspired and just to
Oh,
feel uplifted, because I think it's such a bless you for this gift of sharing, because I feel that now we make a circle with everybody on the planet, all our indigenous peoples, all our varieties, all our opinions have to come together in circle. So I just want to thank you for that, and also to say I know you're involved with Native peoples in the Americas, and do you? Because I've also been involved with Dennis Banks and the Anishinaabe. Do you
mhm.
have some take on where they are with this now and what they're going through? Because this would be really interesting for people also to
Well,
appreciate.
I think that, well, first of all, if this is going to go to Palestine, I just want to say salam alaikum to everybody,
Ah,
and and to greet you from Hawaii. You know, I was able to go to Palestine and I was received so warmly. I have such good memories of Palestine, and so I just want to send that greeting out to you. But yes, I do. I carry a medicine lodge for an international Sundance, but which is in Anishinaabe territory. However, our Sundance chief and the main people are Lakota trained,
okay.
so they were taught by the Lakota. But as far as the Native Americans, there is that same waking up. Um,
Mm,
there is a lot of diversity. Hawaii is so small compared to that,
right.
but there is so much diversity
Yes.
among them, and they are at different places. And I
Okay.
think one of the things that has helped us to remember is the increasing um, participation
Mm,
into traditional ceremony, both here in Hawaii and the Pacific,
right.
as well as on the continent.
Mm,
There are many kinds of ceremony, many different ones. Sundance is only one of them.
sure.
But even something as simple as a sweat lodge
Mm,
um, takes us into a different space.
right.
And the more often we enter into those spaces, because there is going to be a merging of those spaces with our current space.
Mm,
And that's kind of COVID is kind of cleaning up the area so we can lay a foundation. But when the merging of that space happens, that's why that awakening we're talking about, for people to physically be present in that space,
right.
we have to increase our frequency,
That's
or
right.
we will not be able to physically be in the space, physically as per physics,
Yeah.
where you cannot have a dense matter into very high, fine vibration.
Right.
And I think that when we go through ceremony, when we are in, say, for us, the word
Mm,
prayer is a little bit different from our pule, and it probably essentially means the
right.
same thing. But when we are in prayer,
Mm,
we begin to carve out that space with our energy.
sure.
And when we maintain that energy, we are actually creating spaces within a space.
Mm,
And it's going to be that net that totally encircles the globe.
right.
And so all of us are these tiny little holes or knots of the net. Um, and so as we cultivate our spaces and they increase,
Yes.
it's kind of going to be cohesive like a drop of water. All the little
Right.
drops will come together. So,
No,
yeah,
that's
but
good.
there is a lot happening. And,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that I do know, and they do a lot of ceremony for the land.
Yes.
We need to take care of
That,
Mother Earth. We are not independent as humanity. We are not independent from the planet.
that's right. And I think there's this massive shift, paradigm shift going on, where people who've, all just been thinking about things suddenly start to feel things. And as this, my perception is as the energy rises, I know that people around me who were just thinking things cerebrally start to feel things. They start feeling things. Epiphanies start happening within them, which is very disturbing. And that's why I think coming together and sharing in circle, different peoples around the world, and sitting together and creating communities wherever you are is one of those healing and educational ways to raise the energy levels and allow yourself to become concordant with it. So it is going on anyway, whether we like it or not. Mother is, she's raising the energy, and you can either go with it or not. So yeah.
But it's kind of like, knowing that you're not the only one, because
Right.
in this shift, one of the shifts is from individualism to community.
Sure.
But we also have this process of shedding and letting go of what we don't need. And it's kind of like, in so many ways, it's like, okay, well, get rid of those clothes because you don't need it anymore. Get rid of the material clutter because you don't need it. And then you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm standing naked and not in my house. And when you realize that there's so many other people that it's happening to you, and that you're going to be okay, and there're
Right.
going to be people that assure you it's going to be okay.
That's right.
That's huge. That is tremendous.
That's beautiful.
Especially for people whose awakening just is starting now.